Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm happy that one more time I have the opportunity to be among the brothers and sisters of the uh, Zikr and Ahlul Bayt Association at MIT. As Dr. Musalai said, the topic of this talk today is Quran, the biblical Ten Commandments. So I will start with reading maybe the translation of a few Quranic verses from Surah Al-A'raf. They are important, but they are related to what we're discussing. Maybe I decided to read English. Saving time, I read it now as a blessing to start, but then maybe we refer to it. So, Auzubillah minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We made an appointment with Moses for 30 nights and completed them with 10 more. Thus, the tryst of his Lord was completed in 40 nights. And Moses said to Aaron, his brother, be my successor among my people, and set things right, and do not follow the way of the agents of corruption. When Moses arrived at our tryst and his Lord spoke to him, he said, my Lord, show yourself to me, that I may look at you. He said, you shall not see me, but look at the mountain. If it abides in its place, then you will see me. So when his Lord disclosed himself to the mountain, he leveled it, and Moses fell down swooning. When he recovered, he said, immaculate are you. I turn to you in penitence, and I am the first of the faithful. He said of Moses, I have chosen you over the people with my messages and my speech, so take what I give you and be among the grateful. We wrote for him in the tablets advice concerning all things and elaboration of all things. And we said, hold on to them with power and bid your people to hold on to the best of what is in them. Soon I shall show you the about of the transgressors. Yeah, I just before starting, also this talk was scheduled a long time ago, but it's a little bit may have some closeness and affinity what's going on maybe in Palestine, Gaza, and we pray for the peace and stop of suffering of the innocent people and children, and stop of war over there. And then this miniature it shows Prophet Muhammad and Prophet Moses in the night of Miraj. So that's it kind of also related to what we were discussing here. And as Dr. Musala said, you guys have finished the commentary on Surah Al-Isra, Surah 17. This is an appendix or addition to it. I'm not going to go to the abstract because maybe you have read it, and then for saving time. So start with the talk. So as you know, especially those who live in the United States, the Ten Commandments is ever present, is the most religious symbol. We see it, and for decoration, souvenirs, and is always you hear about it, and different versions or paintings of it made. A few years ago was some legal dispute whether they can hang the Ten Commandments in the courts. The whole issue of separation of church and state. So especially southern states, more attention is paid. I mean, everywhere. This is very well known. So for those who live in the United States, I may not need to stress more. And then you can see there are different books about it, and it's really in the general culture. You can think about it in the context of the religious culture. This is the Ten Commandments of reasonable rules for life. This is a really conservative religious publication. And then 10 Commandments for living a life of virtue for the children. The 10 Commandments, what they mean, why they matter, and what we should obey them. So you see, these are a religious context, but the word is so much, or the idea is so much pervasive, then you have it outside of the necessary religious background. 10 Commandments of marriage, or 10 Commandments of making money, or 10 Commandments of Lean Six Sigma. So, this is very, very, and then you see the writers are Jewish and Christian, and is very widespread. I'm using different works or consulting them, and this is one of the starting point by Dr. Gunther German, which is published here. He puts it so that's a kind of was in abstract too. So kind of putting the whole story, that the commandments of the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament are undisputedly fundamental significance for all the communities, societies, and cultures of Judeo-Christian tradition. But you would see we a little bit qualify this in an interesting manner. And then as we can see indeed for many Jews and Christians, this biblical list of religious and ethical precepts is the Magna Carta of the social order. Actually, I don't think our average American, all of them, the good percentage know what Magna Carta is, but definitely they know what Ten Commandment is, especially maybe you go 20 years ago, Bible was the book read in the United States besides the Constitution. But Magna Carta, maybe because the author is European, is for British, for the European, is the kind of the first modern constitution, which the British form of government was based on it, with some rights given to people, or the division of rights and duties between the king, barons, and people. So it's famous Magna Carta, but I think this Ten Commandment is much more known. Uh, uh, it is considered to be, it is a privileged record of law that constitutes biblical microcosm of God's covenant with humankind. So it's kind of, at least for the Christian understanding, which we'll see, this is the essence of some kind of covenant of God with human beings, what God wants from human beings. Look, this will be in the context. We have Old Testament, and the context of Old Testament with the Jewish people, there was some kind of contract or act or covenant between them that they should do something, and God promised them some promised land. For the Christians, we know that they kind of rejected the Old Testament. We have the New Testament, New Covenant. Much of it is related to belief in Jesus, but at least at the core of request, demand, requirements, maybe was manifested in this Ten Commandment, which will come to this more again. So naturally, the question, it is so much pervasive, and I think they think it's so universal moral law is given by God. So for these people, which sometimes also the Western supremacy unconsciously is back of their mind, the question comes whether Quran also includes or expressly refers to God's Ten Commandment. In 19th century, earlier when they studied different religions, especially many of these scholars which are Protestant, British, German, Western Europe, they were looking to the Ten Commandments or equivalent in different religions. So is the last paragraph says, in other words, do the followers of the three monotheistic religions or other religions share a codex of religious and ethical rules equally crucial to their lives and coexistence? I mean, actually, one way say, if all three share the same code, so that's a good foundation, at least some assume, for dialogue or, that Abrahamic religious idea, so that has some common intersection. That's a good start of some producing some harmony or some starting point. So that's also some people view it. But we have to see what's really the nature of these Ten Commandments and then see how it works. To be a little bit more accurate, we have to go through, in the Bible, this is not called Ten Commandment. This is a more later wordage. Actually, in the biblical Hebrew and a rabbinical Hebrew, which is kind of later on coming out, it is called 10 words instead of 10 commandments. But still, whether there's distinction between commandment words is a little bit, the word of God, essentially sometimes the commandment. And then as a result, it's called Decalogue. And then I will use 10, this is a Greek word, deca, come deca and logoi, means 10 words. So sometimes maybe I'm referring it to as Decalogue in the discussion, 10 sayings. So we have to be careful. They're identical. 10 commandments and Decalogue. Decalogue is more kind of technical term. And then interestingly, there are two versions of it, very similar. One, and Exodus, the Sefer Khuruj, Exodus, when they give the story of Israelites coming out of Egypt and, the issue of Pharaoh coming after them, and the Nile, the river or the ocean, the sea opens up, and now Pharaoh is dies and so on, and then coming out to Sinai wilderness. That's Exodus discusses, and then Deuteronomy, Sefer Tasniah is another version of it. These two versions are a little bit different, and that could be also interesting topic of discussion. But I'm not going through that. We will focus on the first version, which is the simpler one and the more famous one. But the only thing we have to say in Deuteronomy, the story is set the way that Moses again is retelling what happened the first time these laws or tablets come to him and restating them, and in a context, a bigger context of different laws, rituals, regulations, prescriptions. So Deuteronomy is more a book of law, but Exodus is mostly the history, what's happening. Okay. So what was the story kind of we cite in the Quranic verses too? According to this passage in Exodus, the 10 commandments were divinely revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai and were engraved on 2 tablets of stone. The whole, and you see the figures we have on the first pages, slides. So the 10 commandments, it seems, was written from the Quran. It's not clear what was written on those tablets, but something important was written. This biblical story says this 10 commandment was written on those tablets. Was only these 10 commandments on the tablets? If it's our typical tablets, I doubt that. It must be more. But these are really questions we cannot answer. Okay. They appear as a summary statement of the covenant requirement between God and Israelites. That's one way also to look at it too. These are the essence of it, maybe the basics of it. And then they usually, people categorize them differently. One categorization is that if we call them 10, 5 of them are prohibitions not to do something, or actually a majority of them, sorry, more than 5. Majority of these 10 are things not to do. We shouldn't do this stuff. And then a few of them are the things we should do. This one division. But the other division, which maybe again, everybody has his own point on it, which maybe more important categorization of 10 Commandments is, we will see it soon. I mean, but this when we read it, have this in mind. One is more, the first 5 is more related to relation of humans to God. And then we'll see it, and the other 5 relates or regulates interaction between humans. So this is I think, more helpful categorization. So maybe let's read the slide. The first group primarily includes the rules concerning the relation of humans to God. They unconditionally prohibit polytheism, all forms of idolatry, blasphemy. Furthermore, there are decrees that people are to rest on one day in 7, the Sabbath, and honor their parents. So interesting, honor the parents is put the relationship to God, which could be interesting because even the Quranic one says after obedience of God, really obedience or honor parents just come after servitude to God, obedience to God. So whether it's there or what is the second group, again, this is a division. Maybe people want to have symmetric one. The second group more directly regulates interaction between humans. These rules command that one shall not take human life, against murder, adultery, theft or steal, false witness, nor be a false witness against one's neighbor, nor desire a person or things not one's own. Coveting of neighbors, house, wife, wealth, or so on. Okay, so we are going to read it from Exodus, and then look, it starts, and God spoke all these words. This is God is talking to Israelites when they're on the Sinai Peninsula. There are that 40 years of being lost in the wilderness after coming out of Egypt. I mean, they haven't reached Promised Land, but they're 40 years over there. They are near Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. And then God, at least in this context, the Sinaitic context is very explicit because it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of land of slavery. Then this part is introductory part, and then I put the red numbers to the ones that usually people count as the commandments. There are sentences in between which describing the commandments, so they don't consider them separate commandments. And this issue of counting how many commandments is, we don't dispute the biblical one. They're doing it for a couple of thousand years, but we will see when we go to the Quranic one is a little bit maybe not clear cut. But here, okay, this is the way you usually do. So the first commandments: you shall have no other gods besides me or before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. This could have influenced, I'm going to read digression, the whole prohibition. Okay, I shouldn't say that, but this is similar to the prohibition we have again making images or statues in Islam, but which is not explicit in the Quran, but it is a common sunnah. You shall not bow down to them or worship them for these idols, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. So this at least states blessing of God goes to the generations, and also punishment goes to generation. We are not really commenting on these, just listing it. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless or misuse his name. This I use a modern translation, New International Version, to be easier readable. But maybe the King James was more more interesting, more lofty. They said, you shall not use the name of the Lord in vain. And then that in some Jewish understanding, this means you shouldn't mention the name of God, So that's the prohibition, not even mentioning the name of God, Jehovah or Yahweh, and then writing just a letter or calling it differently and so on. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, and the 6 days you shall labor and do all the work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Lord of God. On it you shall do not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, or nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in the 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Regarding Sabbath, 12 verse, which is the 5th commandment: honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. So these last ones are more straight. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. There is a continuation. I will come to it, but there are differences between this version in Exodus and Deuteronomy, which could be interesting. I'm not going through that. But for example, one example is the last commandment, which is you shall not covet your neighbor's house. And then the wives comes after that. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. And then the way it's listed, you think wife is the property of the neighbor. So in that sense that the neighbor has some property, include house, wife, male servant, female servant, ox, donkey. So in this way, really even wife comes secondary to the house, is not very attractive or interesting. So in the Exodus, they changed it. They make a line for the wife first and then neighbor's house. So, so means between Exodus, that has come separately. And then whether how you count it or all those stuff is another story. Okay, there is one continuation which very often when people discuss this, they don't mention it, but I think this will be more important, that it shows some intertextuality with the Quran. And maybe Quran, because we need to, we're correcting it, that issue of the God, Tajalla Jabal, and then so, meeting of Moses with God happens in 2 instances. One time he's alone, and what we saw, he's discussing with God, can I see you? And God said, look to that mountain. And then Moses lost consciousness. Another time he went with 70 people. And then whether it's 1 time or 2 times is a little bit discussion, is not clear. And even the Bible the story has jumps here. So that could be take another lecture to see what Bible says, what Quran says, what is the truth. But look at this issue is some similarity. We can see the trace of it in the Quran. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, there was something about the mountain. They trembled with fear. So that could be referred that 70 people of them, which went in Moses, kind of died. And then they stayed at a distance, said, but this story is a little different. They stayed at distance, said to Moses, speak to us yourself, and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. So something now they start to say, okay, we cannot talk with the God directly. But before that, they had requested, the Surah Al-Baqarah has it. Moses said to people, do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning. The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. I mean, and again, the whole is good when you reading this, comparing the imageries of the Quran and imagery here. This, I'm not going to go through that. Okay, so this is the Old Testament. If there was no emphasis in New Testament, it may have not been remained or as important. So what I'm saying in this section is that really why the Ten Commandments is important nowadays in US is because of Christianity, not because Judaism. And we will see that. Look, the point is that under calling Christianity, the whole Mosaic law was rejected. The whole Testament, the whole edifice, the whole halakhic law, the whole Sharia type of thing they have, the great detail, we'll see a little bit more of it, was rejected by Paul. And then said those was before the new covenant is with Jesus, and the meaning of it is different. He died on the cross to wash your sins. But it in two sentences ascribed to Jesus in the Gospel of Mark and Gospel of Matthew, Jesus refers to them. In one of them, he only mentioned that follow the commandments. In another one, the person asking, okay, what are the commandments? He lists a few of them. And then you see has a good cross-section with 10 commandments, but it's something extra. And that's also interesting. So it's not necessarily these 10. Some of it, these 10 may be the important one, but it considers some other ones more important. And if you go to Deuteronomy, you will see it is like that. And this will be also important in the Quranic one. And then when I will explain how the Jews looked into the Ten Commandments now, this become more clear. These 10 are important, but it's not exhaustive list. They're not the most important one. They're not the only one in the Jewish one. But in the Christianity kind of become like that because by rejection of the whole Mosaic law, still Christianity needs some basic laws. I mean, you could not have without any morality. And every culture, murder, adultery, stealing is forbidden. Every primitive culture when the society is built, they have it. Aborigine of anyone, any Neanderthals, I'm not sure, but I guess they may have it too. So so that is Paul have to keep it a little bit. And these three gospels are written separately and associated with it. So this, as all those laws of Judaism, which we see about 613 explicit in the Bible and other stuff, these are kept and emphasized. And then for seeing that, let's see that Matthew has a background in it, but 17 to 19. So a rich man come to Jesus, just to ask him. Just then a man came up, he's rich, to Jesus and asked, teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life? And then Jesus said, why do you ask me what is good? Jesus replied, there is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments. Although this story, a little bit different versions come in different Bibles, different New Testaments. So I'm not going to go that. There is some interesting detail because in one of them, the first sentence doesn't say what is good. It says, oh, who you are good. And this response of Jesus is edited here is more to that I'm not the good, the only one, God is good. But let's put that aside. Maybe I should introduce it. Let's read what is here. So Jesus said, why do you ask me about what is good? Jesus replied, you know it. There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments. So he said, God is only good. And if you want to get the eternal life, salvation, going to heaven, just follow his commandments. We know in Matthew, especially in other places, in the Sermon of the Mount, Jesus stresses I'm not going to change even a dot from the commandments. We're going to stick to Mosaic law. But what I'm going to do, give it better meaning of it, give it depth of it. It's like how Ihsan or Rafat look to we have a hadith Imam Zain al-Abidin regarding Hajj, which Nasr Khosrow, the Persian poet, had made it as a poem, that what is the meaning behind all those Hajj rituals? Uh, that is really the way it seems Jesus portrayed in Matthew. So this is consistent with it, commandments. But the person who asked which ones, because they thought he's a reformer, or maybe some of them is not as important or not. You see, Jesus listed them. At least this list is important. And then he said, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, you will see most of the first few ones are in the explicit commandment, Exodus we read. Love your neighbor as yourself wasn't. Was that don't covet what your neighbor has, do not look to what your neighbor has, jealousy or stuff like that. But this wasn't love your neighbor as yourself. This you can indirectly conclude with other parts of the Old Testament. So that exactly means commandments for Jesus or the Jews not necessarily limited to the one come in Exodus or even repeated in Deuteronomy, but the whole thing may be expressed in the whole Old Testament Torah or Deuteronomy. But there is a technical point which we don't have time, we don't go through that. The people have looked whether other prophets have mentioned or referred to these commandments, other Old Testament prophets or Christians or non Christians, scholars, or other people, writers. The question is that how we can know this guy is really referring to 10 commandments, because these virtues or vices which are forbidden or stressed are very universal. And then, the researchers, scholars have put some rules. If explicitly mentions commandment, if have a list which shares a good decent number of those 10 commandments, especially keeping the order and all those stuff, maybe we can conclude this guy, when he was talking about commandments, is really not talking about general commandments, but the 10 commandments. Again, this is more in the context of Christian mind discussion. So look, Jesus said this, and because of this 10 commandment, which give at least a very basic framework, because by the way Paul did, you reject all dietary law, you reject all the Mosaic law, so you cannot have a religion without law. Look, Buddha came, at least apparently they said, oh, I don't want any theology, maybe, I'm not sure he said we don't have law, because you cannot have mysticism or spiritual wayfaring without morality. But, you need a framework to hang in this. People need guidance, and some explicit things need to be set, do's and do nots should be listed. So this becomes the core for Christianity, the starting point, because Jesus explicitly said they're very rational. The other thing you have to notice, and maybe it's good to say it now, the influence of the Greek philosophy is there too, because Christianity came and Rabbinic Judaism came at the time with the Greek Hellenic culture was very dominant. You have rationality. It is the time after Plato and Aristotle, how mind can discover the stuff. We'll see some of it, how reason is powerful to do some of this stuff. And then we look into universal values, still the debates, or reason and revelation, philosophers, even Ibn Rushd, Avicenna, whether the morality can be discovered by the reason alone or not, or so on. We'll see some of it. So this list we see Jesus has listed are more the universal type, and that you see it was a trend through Christianity need have a list, and then they wanted to be the least, for example, rational. So they didn't like some of those detail of ritual law that you don't eat this piece of meat, but you can eat this piece of meat, because the Jewish regulation is very complicated, and some of them they said there is no rationality. I mean this like we have whether namaz maghrib should be 3 rakah, 4 rakah, 2 rakah. So how we know that? I mean, so some of this, okay, we are told it is like that. We see the mindset, the Christian mindset, rational mindset, do not like these type of laws, and they put them ritual. why do you have to say set 3 subhanallah, 1 subhanallah, so on? These they don't like. But the Jews regulation lots of these. What to eat, not to eat. Don't mix milk. Don't mix with meat. So this could be expanded, but just alluded to it. You guys have maybe background information or can discuss it in the question. But to go forward, as you can see, this is very famous, and the scholars, the Jewish scholars, rabbis have gone to the Bible, the text of Old Testament, and they have found 613 commandments. And 365 of them are negative commandments. You should do this, not do this. And 248 are positive commandments. Ibn Maimonides, Ibn Maymun, the great Jewish philosopher, live in Islamic words, have a commentary on it. And they have some zawghiyat here, some they say, 365 is equal to the days of the solar year, 248 equals to the number of the bones. I don't know where they got this main organs in human body. And then we do kind of some of this stuff too. And I think, again, the Muslim world, they're affected by the Jewish scholars. Some of this stuff come from there. They listed 365, 248. But interestingly, a few days ago, some of these commandments came to the fore, because when Netanyahu referred to Palestine as Amalekites. Okay, 3 of the commandments out of 613 are related to Amalekites. And one of them are very cruel. Kill the children, smash their head. Sorry, I have to say that. So, this is, I forgot the 3, but there are some of it. All 3 are negative regarding Amalekites. So this is the story. But the point is that, coming back to our story, it becomes interesting, is this. Before the Christianity came, this part of Exodus and Deuteronomy was very popular. Look, there are parts of prayer for us popular, like Ayatul Kursi, or when we do prayers, most of us, we do Surah Al-Ikhlas, maybe Inna Anzalna, something like that. These are very popular. So before the Christianity, from the records we have, it seems every day they used to recite this part of Exodus, which I read to you, 1 to 17, because still they thought these are the most important, the core of commandments got to them. Look, it says, the Mishnah records that during the period of Second Temple, the 10 commandments were recited daily before reading the Shema Israel. And Shema Israel, as like Sama, oh here, oh Israel, is the most important prayer of Jewish people, which is like Surah Al-Ham, or Lord's Prayer for Christianity. Surah Al-Ham for us Muslims, which is the most important part of every Qur'an, of a daily prayer. And for Christians, is the equivalent is Lord's Prayer. Now, Shema Yisrael was the top, but that means this 10 commandment, this part of Exodus, which we read, was used to read daily. But you see, this is a big change, but this practice was abolished in the synagogues by the time Christianity comes dominant or spread. It's like you don't read Ayatul Kursi anymore, or no people read in Surah like Farhad, or suddenly Dosh Kabir, people stop reading it during other nights. But this practice was abolished in synagogues so as not to give ammunition to heretics who claimed that they were the only important part of Jewish law, or to dispel a claim by early Christians that only the commandments were handed down at Mount Sinai rather than the whole Torah. Yeah, so you see what's going on. The Jewish rabbis worried. They thought these 10 are out of 613. And for them, all 613 are important, not just these 10. But they accepted, okay, 10 are big. But when the Christianity came, and would emphasize with 10, as we see it here, is like those other ones are secondary, not important. Okay, you follow it and not follow it is important. We have this debate. Some people may talk about hijab is one of those not important ones. But okay, anyway, I don't want to open all this stuff, but you can see the mindset can go where. So the point is this. Because of this reaction, and especially for the Jews, that 613 all were equally important, they start to not reading it. And then, okay, I'm not going to go to Shema Israel, which is, that's another story. Deuteronomy. And then this has happened. This has continued to be, not only at the time of, first century, second century Palestine, which because Christianity was growing, or later in Roman period, they stopped reading the Ten Commandments. It is happening. It's happening. So it says in later centuries, rabbis continued to omit the Ten Commandments from daily liturgy in order to prevent confusion among the Jews that are only bound with by Ten Commandments and not also by many other biblical and Talmudic laws, such as the requirements to observe holidays other than Sabbath. Actually, kind of it is for us too. I mean, so if somebody wants to say, okay, I just took this part of Risala and then I don't do the other parts, it's not very good. And then interestingly, the thing which was daily read in the synagogues before Christianity, now you only read it twice per year. Because they have the daily reading of the Torah. They schedule that one time Torah or Old Testament is read the whole year. So because they read Exodus and Deuteronomy once a year, and Deuteronomy is kind of a repetition of Exodus, so they hear the two versions of Ten Commandments once because of that. And one time is another festival. They have Shavuot, which is in summer, spring, May, spring, middle spring. Is about the harvest and stuff like that. So this is the case. Okay, so this was the background. We have it in Bible. What is the importance is it's everywhere, but really is more Christian in the sense. In the United States, this interaction is sophisticated. The Jewish people also maybe let it be emphasized, but still, you know what the background story is. Now, regarding Quranic commentary, there are some methodological things which somehow in some of the other previous lectures, we touched them. And some of them I want to mention it here. And interestingly, this topic, in one sense, touched many of those topics we had. We can say. One is, although this one I'm not going to go through it. One is that looking to the Quran diachronically, looking which order surahs were revealed, whether there was any change. This is Western scholar mind and partially could be useful. Whether emphasis of Quran changed or whether something added to it, or just Quran initially says the detail, other times refer to it. Because we will see the one we call on par with Ten Commandments, it mentioned the Quran 2 or maybe 3 times. So that could be a case, but we'll see. It's not a big deal. But, for example, the word deen, sometimes you see the way it was emphasized in the Quran initially was different. And then when they go from Meccan surahs to Medina surahs, more maybe initially is Yawm ad-Din, and then more individual, more collective. So this idea that looking to the concept, how maybe during the 20 years of revelation of Quran, is it changed or is not changed? What emphasized could be important. Because especially regarding the Bible, I didn't go through that. There is some important, subtle but important differences between the way those wordage of Ten Commandments in Exodus and Deuteronomy. That is very detailed, but could be interesting topic. As I said, one of them was the wife. But one time is really mentioned part of what man owns, and the next time and even after the house, before the slave. But the next version switch it back and put it somewhere separate at what the neighbor owns. Okay, but the one which is more related to us is regarding the surahs as a unit and coherence, and then it as unit meaning a kind of unity of meaning or context of a surah. That surah is a literary unit by itself. It's called a surah. We have the whole 10 lectures about it. But then it makes a question why these specific verses have come in this surah. Or because these specific verses have come in this surah, does have any different meaning. Look, for example, the Quran mentions the story of Moses and Pharaoh in many different surahs, with some overlapping, some differences. But what you have to see, as Allama Tabatabai says, every time a different aspect of the surah story is emphasized. And that aspect, which is more related to the main theme of surah, is mentioned or emphasized, and so on. And So what we were discussing, so naturally, Surah Al-Isra, we are asking why this verses which we're going to discuss have come in this Surah 17, because they could naturally come other surahs. Would naturally no, but it could have come, but it seems it is intended to be here and makes sense to be here. The other thing Western scholars like is intertextuality between Quran and the Bible. Whether Quran is alluding to the text of Bible. Quran is sometimes is dialogue with, besides the mushrikeen, polytheists of Mecca, is a dialogue with the Christians and Jews or their texts. Sometimes confirm them, sometimes correct them, sometimes reject them, criticize them. But one interesting thing, again, in this context is important, and most Western scholars even didn't notice it. Is the Quran necessary in dialogue with the Bible, which is, New Testament a few hundred years before, and Old Testament maybe more than, again, depending when it's closed, 700, 800 years. Torah maybe a little bit older. Is dialogue with them, referring to them, alluding to them? Sometimes it does, or sometimes to the beliefs of the common contemporary Christianity and Judaism. Because in us also, Quran is important, but sometimes our major beliefs, major actions, not coming from Quran, coming from Hadith. For the Jews also, let's come from Talmud. For Christians also come from the writings. For example, issue of Mahdaviyyah. How much of it is in Quran? It is very core of it, but not all of it. Much of the rituals we have for Ashura or other stuff is not at all in Quran. The whole Karbala, which is the most ritual practice we have, is not. So one of the things which we see, one of the scholars, Dr. Saghab Hussain, have noticed, actually for the Ten Commandments, everybody has compared between Quran and Bible. But even the Bible, as the Western scholar shows, we have a transition, a subtle evolution going from Exodus to Deuteronomy, one of two books of Torah. And then after that, you see different thinkers, different scholars, a little bit emphasize different commandments. As you see Jesus even in Matthew, if we accept, he got few from 10 commandments, but the last one was a mixture of that one and from another commandment. He doesn't say not covet your neighbor's property, but he said love your neighbor as yourself, which is matching his own view of what things should be, the emphasis of love of other human beings and so on. So you see a subtle change has happened. And then, so maybe the better study is that filling in the gap between Bible and Quran. That is what other writings are, or what are the different views Jews and Christians have developed in those years. So you see many of the Jewish scholars under the influence of, and especially Christians under the influence of the Greek philosophy, other events, they emphasize less on the commandments which are ritualistic, like Sabbath, observing Sabbath. They but emphasize more the one they thought is moralistic. So I would say that we were working on this intertextuality because already this, I'm not sure how much time we'll have, Quran and Bible to do it, but the real work is an interesting work you can do, see a more bigger spectrum. For example, like in the Syriac Christianity, what those Christian scholars would say, which one they would emphasize. The verses sometimes are important, sometimes emphasize, for example, at the beginning of revolution, Fazlullah al-Mujahideen ala ajran azima is the verse you heard a lot. And then because that organization picked up it as a slogan, then you didn't hear it as much. نريد أن نمن الذين استضعفوا في الأرض نجعلهم أمنا ونجعلهم وارثين was, again, we heard a lot. But still we hear it. But then so it's not me, is there or is not. Sometimes the emphasis and the Quran, because the Quran wants to guide, if they want to be in dialogue, sometimes you have to address the belief of Christian and Jews of his contemporary. Because it wants to attract them, it wants to correct them. Not necessarily what the Jews of 600 years before think, but okay, because the scripture is always important, you always somehow are in dialogue with the scripture. This is a big topic. Maybe some later on, with Dr. Salah had a plan. We have a series on Quran and Bible. We have to discuss it. Then, interestingly, we had something with structural markers, which could be important here too. I don't know how much I've done, but we should see. Okay, look. Till now, I mentioned Surah Al-Isra, Araf. But the three surahs which are important for us regarding this equivalent of the Ten Commandments, the most important Surah Al-Isra, then Surah Al-An'am, and a little bit in Surah Al-Baqarah. The two important one again is Isra and An'am. But then you see these are first Meccan besides Baqarah. The order is more or less the same. Araf, if we put Araf the same, all these big scholars, Noldeke, Al-Azhar, Egyptians, and Marifat, Shi, Sunni, and Western, all have the same order. Put Surah Al-Araf aside, which I read it already. Araf was also Makki, but one says earlier Makki, one said later Makki, but the other ones have the same more or less order. At least they say this is before the other one. And then everybody agree is Meccan. So here is not a big deal. And then the only thing we could have done is look whether the formulation in An'am is different from Isra, but An'am is a summary list. We'll see that. So what I'm saying is that Quran is kind of referring to three lists, somehow referring to 10 commandments. But if we be careful, two of them I think is his own list. And then this Baqarah is referring to the Mosaic list, or the one which we had in Exodus. So let's see. But the most important, which we really focus, is the Surah Al-Isra, because it was the most important one, as related also to the topic. There are a few studies done, Quranic and Decalogue. This relation Quran and Decalogue. This slide is from Dr. Salah Hussein. So, but I kind of have gone this lecture before once in Farsi, but this has changed. Changed. I've used this most of these. Yeah, I mean, this and points. These articles we kind of reference it today, except the Zelantine, which I maybe mentioned. The other ones kind of we alluded to, especially Briner, Neuwirth, and Gunther. Gunther already you saw this tree. We discussed it. So this is William Briner. He was Jewish, and it's one of the first one. And he, Professor Berkeley. Maybe he's passed away, and I think he's one of the earliest work on this. Although there were people before him to see, and it was fair judgment. And this kind of is starting. I don't know if I'm worried. Okay, I have to go a little bit fast. So within the, so again, as we said, this commandment is very important for the Judeo-Christian culture, and look. One of the things which I mentioned is I didn't mention in this list of things we have to consider is this. When we discuss Quran and Bible, Western scholars, due to separate Western supremacy, usually assume Quran because coming after Bible has borrowed from Bible. Because mostly from the polemics of medieval times, it come to the modern times, okay, and then now added to naturalistic reductionist mechanisms. They don't believe in the revelation or by the method historical critical. We don't talk about revelation of God. So Prophet Muhammad should have learned something about the Bible. Maybe somebody teach him, so have a copy of Bible. All this stuff. The idea was, okay, Quran copied from Bible. What you see is not that easy, and it has not been, and that's kind of is dying now. Because people have noticed Quran maybe dialogue refer to it, but Quran has its own way of doing it very differently. And sometimes they say, oh, the Quran is different from the Old Testament. And then sometimes they say Quran did as a mistake. But as Walid Saleh said, Quran clearly is very clear when you read Quran. Quran knows the version of Bible. It's not that he wants to quote the Bible and do a mistake. He knows what the Bible is and completely changing it. For example, the issue of Trinity, other stuff, and criticize them. So this is also another example of it. And then you see this idea was so pervasive. Even as such a man, which Houston Smith, which passed a few years ago, 96 years old, his book, I think, still is the best book to start about any religion. He has tried to be fair, and many of the followers of those religions who read his book, he say, This guy is really explain my religion the way I think it is. He was Christian, but he did Muslim prayers. He was a friend of Dr. Nasser, Said Hussein Nasser. But even he himself, but this is his early, younger time. Maybe he got older, but I'm not sure he changed it or not. He's now the book is called The World Religions, but his first edition was Religions of Man and was pioneering at that time. You didn't have such a book. Berkeley University did it, published in 1950s, maybe late 1950s, and it was very revolutionary by its time. But this is his idea. It is true, the Ten Commandments, that Hebraic morality has made its greatest impact upon the world. Taken by Christianity and Islam, the Ten Commandments constitute the moral foundation of half of the world present population. So you see this idea, okay, this is from the Jewish one, Christianity pick it up. We will see how the Christianity did or not. And then he said, okay, Islam pick it up. And then he didn't investigate where is the Ten Commandments in Islam, what it is it similar? Do really Islam pick that up, copy that one, or react to it? None of this. But interestingly, Briner, which himself is Jewish, start to show some fairness here. It says, while we assume the Smith's statement is true regarding Christianity, at least part of the second sentence quoted above raises questions. Okay, we accept maybe Christianity somehow borrowed, because they were all Jews, take off the Ten Commandments from Judaism. But Islam is not like that. And then he said the part regarding Islam, the responses to it would raise some questions, and the responses to which can lead to some interesting ideas about the development of Islamic religious story. So he says we are asking two questions, it was in the abstract as in the questions which I should answer. We're actually after two distinct but perhaps connected questions to respond to Smith's assumption that the biblical Ten Commandments were taken over by Islam. Okay, we can answer. First, are the Ten Commandments of the Bible actually known in Islam? Is Qur'an showing a sign or Islamic tradition? Here we only say Qur'an because Islamic tradition was much early tainted by those Israelites or the people which know both, so it's very complicated. But let's go for the Qur'an. Is the Quran showing a sign, awareness, or some allusion or hint to the biblical Ten Commandments, one we saw? Even if we grant that they were taken over by Christianity, was this also the case for Islam? This is the second question, which he answers no. Did Islam borrow, appropriate, or otherwise take over the Ten Commandments? If so, how and where are they presented? And then because he assumed, he doesn't even mention where the Ten Commandments is in the Quran. And if so, where is the Ten Commandments in the Quran? How is this borrowed? What is similar, different, or not? Then the other answer, which is important for us, does Islam has its own indigenous equivalent to Ten Commandments? If so, in what context does it appear? And does it resemble the biblical version or differ from it? That's the main idea. What he says, and this is the part I agree when I like this, to begin with, it is important to avoid the rather obvious pitfall often met with comparing religious traditions, but especially when dealing with Islam, because Islam is the last, and then some biases Muslim scholars had. I always assume that Islam has borrowed something, or they look to the origin of things in Islam, so Islam couldn't be authentic because it's the oldest, or so on. But he says it is important to raise this point because Islam, unlike Christianity, which is always accepted its Jewish origin, does not accept a depth to Jewish tradition, whatever the tempting similarities may be. That's clear. Muslims from the beginning, from the Quran, from the history, we don't accept to be depthful to the Jewish tradition from the beginning as a criticism, so on. But Christianity from the beginning said, yeah, Jesus was a Jew and we were Jewish, and we want to. That's the stories we know. Okay. But then he says, if anything, these similarities are often not so much an actual borrowing from the Jewish tradition as a response to it. That's the way of thinking we have to learn. Very often we see stories of Quran very different, a different sense of it, different characters. Even the story of Joseph, which is the closest story, a complete story, a skeleton is similar. The details absolutely substantially different, and with important conclusions. And to response to it and to the long Jewish presence in Arabia. And then he says, these are important sentences, although a little bit maybe with a short in time, but Islam certainly acknowledges the fact of this presence, beginning with the Quran, a considerable portion of which consists of exhortations and condemnations addressed directly to the children of Israel. This acknowledgement is evidenced most strongly in the many traditions which are preserved about the prophets of the Hebrew. It says, yeah, Quran accepted Judaism's order. Clearly, Quran came talking with the Jews, is Bani Israel, Ahlul Kitab, and nowhere is more reflected when Quran talks about those prophets which have important role in the Hebrew Bible. And what's interesting in Quran, some of them calls them prophet, but the understanding of Quran and prophecy is different than what the Hebrew Bible shows. For example, David and Solomon, we think the prophet are sinless, but in the Bible things are more complicated. So two characters are important. We know that Islam, among those biblical or Hebrew prophets, two characters are important. One is Abraham, one is Moses. I skipped Abraham. We know that in a sense, Brenner says, interestingly, Islam and somehow take over Abraham for itself. It says Abraham was neither Jew and Christian, and then he was a Muslim in the sense of submitting to the will of God. And then in one sense, Islam is renewing his true teaching, Hanif, or so on. And then Moses is an important one. Because remember, we're answering the question is somehow Islam has an eye on the Moses, his mission, and so on. And then Moses is important. Again, I'm not going through that, but we have a hadith that Prophet himself mentioned his similarity to Moses. That is famous that his similarity of Imam Ali to the Prophet is like Aaron to the Moses, except no prophet comes after the Prophet Muhammad. So we have this idea that the Prophet Muhammad is very similar to Moses, and the fact that some similarity Prophet Muhammad considered himself with Moses kind of is accepted. The name of Moses is more than any name of any other prophet, any person that come to Quran. So I think we have that background. We don't need to go through that. All these contexts should be in mind when we examining the first question, whether Islam, Quran essentially, shows some amendments and 10 commandments. Now, I think we set the background for some indirect one, and these background may be related to Surah Al-Isra, but it seems Quran is more clearly, more directly referring to it. There are two verses, there are two occasions I think we can accept with, it seems. On two occasions, Quran appears to make a specific reference to the commandments revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai. Okay, if the commandments at Mount Sinai, it doesn't mention 10 commandments, but the whole context we read it was on Mount Sinai. I read that extra part. God talked to Moses. If you read before and after, Moses go up, come down, bring Aaron up with him to the mountain to God, is a little bit complicated. And then we have the Quran also mentions 2 times, one Moses along with God, and he lose consciousness when see what happened to mountain. The next time 70 people go with him. So it's a little bit complicated. We don't want to go through it. But if you look to this Medinan period, let's see the Medina period, and then I'll explain for you. If we look to this the Surah Al-Baqarah, which is Medina, the verses 83 and 84, it seems Quran both is referring to the covenant and then some list of commandments, which somehow a cross-section of 10 commandments, the same way we had it for Jesus in Gospel of Matthew. So I put the English because we have no time, and the boldface, you can see what's going on. At least this is the one to sell. I mean, if you don't agree fully with it, but at least you see. Remember when we made a covenant with the children of Israel, you shall not serve any save God, and to be good to parents. So you see this part of the 10 commandments. But the near kinsman is a little bit new, and the near kinsman to the orphans wasn't in the 10 commandments. To the needy, this is more Quranic. Speak good to all people, perform the prayer, pay the alms. Not all these listed in the specific 10 commandment, but you may find the cross-section with the other commandments in Old Testament. So that's kind of the view that even Jesus had and the Jews had, that the commandments are not necessarily these 10, which come in Exodus, is a bigger list, but these are important ones. Then you turn away all but a few of you serving aside. Remember, we made a covenant with you, shall not shed your own blood, neither expel your own from your habitations. shed your own blood kind of maybe against murder, but the expulsion wasn't in that specific list of 10 commandments. Then you confirmed it and yourselves bore witness. There is a 85th verse, which I don't think we need to read it. So in these verses of Baqarah is the issue of covenants, is referring to some specific example of these commandments or covenants, maybe some similarity to 10 commandments, but if it's not that 10 commandments, at least have a good intersection with the general commandments Jews will receive in Old Testament. So it seems, and the story of Moses, you look, matches the story of those tablets. We read it the first verses. So we can say that there is some allusion to it. But the other ones were the verses we read at the beginning of lecture. I'm not going to go through that anymore, but you see there explicitly it refers to tablets. And again, this verse 145 is important. And he wrote for him on the tablets of everything and admonish. So on that tablets was a sense of the lost human beings live for salvation. موعظة وتفصيلا لكل شيء. It's very كل شيء is a little bit, and it distinguishes everything. So take it forcefully and command thy people to the first of it. So when the Quran refers to tablets, it refers to the commandments. More or less, it seems is really hinting to at least we accept the background story in the biblical one. Indirectly, is alluding to 10 commandments or more. Again, these are the verses. We are not going to go. And then I just want to add the story of that, because you remember I read that. We read the Quranic story of the Surah Al-Araf when Moses lost consciousness, when فلما جاء موسى لميقاتنا وكلمه ربه قال رب أرني أنظر إليك قال لن تراني ولكن أنظر إلى جبل فاستقر مكانه فسوف تراني فلما تجلى ربه للجبل جعله دكا وخر موسى صاعقا. This part is Quranic. Okay. Let's see what is the counterpart in Exodus, which is close, although this is not, for example, few sections after the 10 commandments come. But there are a couple of times they go back and forth. But then again, you see there is some intertextuality. You think it's the same story, but Quran studies differently, and then you see this is so anthropomorphic. So God is like human. We have, unfortunately, some of the Salafis we have this anthropomorphic view, but in Shia Islam and all Islamic world, generally this God is different than anything. So this is the part, this is the dialogue between God and Moses. So Moses said to God, "Oh, let me behold your presence. Let me see you." And God answered, he answered, "I will make all my goodness pass before you as I proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious and show compassion to whom I will show compassion." But he said, "You cannot see my face." Lantarani is here. You cannot see my face. For man may not see me alive. See me and leave. Sorry. So you cannot see my face, for man may not see me and leave. That's exactly kind of, Moses didn't see God, but see the tajalla of God on mountain, and that even already made him unconscious. So that kind of indirectly says, if we see God, wouldn't leave. Station yourself, but this part of it, station yourself on the rock, and as my presence passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have passed by. So issue of the rock and something is there here, then I will take my hand away and you will see my back, and my face must not be seen. So the face, Wajhullah, the Quran have here is very literal. You can see my back, you cannot see my face. So that's comparing how the texts are different. Okay, there is, whether there is any other allusions to 10 commandments. Some of Mufassirin by mistake have taken verses 101 of Surah Al-Isra, because we don't have time, and this is completely wrong, and it was commented by Brother Mehran Dibaji. I'm not going through that because we don't have time, so let's go to the main idea. The main idea is this. We say the counterpart of 10 commandments in Quran is in Surah Al-Isra. And this is not very accidental. Kind of Quran, because there are important things in this surah related to Moses, related to Jewish history, related to Isra, which kind of indirectly by the method of the Quran has. Look, if these verses were not in this surah, we will read it again, we will see their commandments. Okay, we will see their commandments. Any surah, they put it one surah separately, small surah, big surah, put it in Baqarah, Al Imran, you will see it. But the fact that it's in this surah is kind of put on the face and unparalleled and in response to the commandments they have. Kind of, it says, this is our list. And there is also a hadith from Prophet. Everything you find in the Old Testament and New Testament, you find in Quran, and these chapters of Quran, like those chapters in Old Testament, or this chapter in New Testament. So that's, we are going that not only Quran has that story, and deliberately puts its own commandments, which are not necessarily 10, if you let me, I can finish by 15 minutes. I'm not sure. I can come back if you want after dinner doing the question and answer. I don't know how we can do it, or
I don't think we can do it after dinner, given my experience.
Sure.
But yeah, we can go up to 9:15. Is that fine?
Okay. Yeah,
15
let's
minutes?
try to that way. Yeah, let's go to that way, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you. So look, the point is this surah, if you start with it, with some of the verses, you all have seen it. Look, where was the similarity, Moses? Moses went on the mountain, up the mountain, see God in some way, receive the tablets. Prophet Muhammad didn't receive the commandments, which we see necessary in Miraj or Asra, but it is a journey. And then much of these chapters is even the name is Israelites. Their issue is about Israelites. So in this context of this surah, kind of makes it okay. This is nothing necessarily should have been here, but in one sense is put here and is a counterpart. So that's one idea which we have. There are, look, they have worked on it more, and especially if you go besides Bible to the other belief the Jews have during those periods, this maybe or get stronger, but it's not a big deal for us. I mean, more than that in context is important. Okay. So this is the part of this surah, features of this surah, it is there. So what we're saying is that the verses 22-39 containing material that can be seen as equivalent to a Muslim Decalogue or 10 Commandments. Commandments of moral and ethical nature, parallel in many cases either to the biblical Decalogue or to the commands that follow almost immediately thereafter in chapter 21-22 of Exodus. This part is important because what we saw is only chapter 20. But the Quran, Exodus, so let me say, the 10 commandments were the verses 1-17 of chapter 20 of the book of Exodus. But Quranic one is not as we see in Jesus, as we see even with other writers, and the previous example, even Quran, when it's talking about commandments from Surah Al-Baqarah, but then referring to commandments given to Israelites, didn't limit itself to that 10 commandments of chapter 20, but is a mixture of chapter 20, 21, 22. These verses also are not necessarily limited to that 10 commandments. They don't mention all. They mention some extra stuff. Some of those extra stuff may be from chapter 120, 22, and some may be unique to the Quran. And then the conclusion. In no case do they simply imitate the Bible. The wording and tenor of the Quranic commandments present a uniquely Muslim set of universal values. And then the important thing you see in the commandments, which are like the Quranic commandments, they're not 10. Even Zamakhshari or Fakhr Razi counted it find 25. I don't want to call them 25, but something like that. But the point is this is not 10 necessarily. But one feature they have, which I want you to be careful of, focused on it, they are very moral and universal, ethical, and they're less ritualistic in them. The version in Old Testament have a mixture of ritualistic too, but not heavily. But here is less. And that's the point we want to see. So the wording and tenor of the Quranic commandments present a uniquely Muslim set of universal value. I'm not going to go to Surah Al-Isra anymore. You have seen it. I was putting to show the important one. There are a couple of verses nowadays are set. I've read a lot about the corruption of children of Israel in the land twice, but we don't have time to read them. But we need to read this part, the 10 Commandments. Look, the interesting thing I want you to see, because I maybe have not time to read all of it too, because you can read it. The starting point, this is called inclusio, which is the structural unit, the structural marker. I listed structural. So set not up with God and other God, or thou would shall condemn and forsaken. So verse 22 starts with this. And then look, verse 39, which end the story, again end with this. Set not up with God another God, or thou will cast into hell reproach and rejected. Okay, this phrase, which is underlined and bold, is the same. The continuation is a little bit different, but the same meaning. Condemn and forsaken. This one, it says, cast into hell, reproach and rejected. So these two verses, they're marked. This is the technique known, and it comes inclusio in Bible, other places there. Quran doesn't say the beginning of paragraph, end of sentence. Let's go to the new section. Just by this marks it. So put a border. Exactly this between is important. Okay. And then he said, thy Lord has decreed. So exactly this is a covenant. Exactly the same way, Exodus started. That this is the covenant of God, or this is the order of God. And then you start, you shall not serve any but him, be good to your parents. That is a very nice thing to read. I would get my conclusion. I want you to all read it. I really want to save time, because you can read this on your time, although it's important to read it, but maybe I see some summary of it. But look, this Numbers 1, 2, 3, Mr. Gunther, which I see the article, wants to make them very parallel to the Ten Commandments and numbers them. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and picks out 10, not 10. Professor Angelica Neuwirth does too. So some of these Western scholars pushing it to make it 10 commandment, to make it a counterpart, but really they're forcing it. It is not. Because they say, oh, okay, we know it's 25, but some are major, some are minor. We put underneath the major, under minor. No, it's not 10. It's not 10. And being 10 is not important. As we see other people have said, even Neuwirth himself and Briner himself said, which 25 is not important. For example, give the kinsman his right, the needy traveler, never squander. Okay, never squander is a big comment, which I think is the problem of our time. The guys make all these cakes. I mean, I'm smashing the cakes to the face of other people, to just laughing, and then this simple one, and then wasting, eating, all people in hunger, something like that. Never squander is a big one. So you put them all in 3, but this should have a new number. Never squander. The squanderers are brothers of Satan, and Satan is thankful to his Lord. So this is rough. So you see, the counting of 10 is not right, and is not necessarily true, but okay, they tried. And then you see very interesting: slay not your children for fear of poverty, approach not fornication, state not the soul God has forbidden to be killed, do not approach the property of orphan. For example, the Old Testament, you don't have the orphan explicitly 10 commandment. Fill up the measure. This is a very interesting one. Fill up the measure when you measure, and weigh the straight balance. But if you look, all are moral, all are universal, all understandable on all cultures, all are ethical. All are ethical. Pursue not that thou hast no knowledge of. This is very interesting. Nowadays, many fake news. You go, we don't know, we react to something, we fake, the hearing, the sight, the heart. All those shall be questioned of. Walk not on the earth exultantly. Certainly thou wilt never tear the earth open, arrogance, nor attain. So certainly thou will not tear the earth open, nor attain the mountains in height. All of that. Now, this last sentence is important, so we come back to it. All of that, the wickedness of it is hateful in the sight of Lord. So it means the list which I said to you, this is an important list. Between thy Lord has decreed, and it started with this: thy Lord has decreed, coming to here, which all of these I listed for you, which were mostly negative commandments, and some positive, some commandment, like the one you said, be good to parents, is positive, some forbidden. But even here, be good to parents involves some negative stuff. Say not to fight to them, neither chide them, but speak unto them respectfully. These are all important, and it's come to here that all of that, the wickedness of it is hateful in sight of thy Lord. This is the wisdom. This is also important. Wickedness of these and wisdom thy Lord has revealed to thee. And then again, set up not with God another God. Okay. First, the number, as I said, the numbering is not 10, and Razi had 25. Another person, Gunther, and Razi, famous Sunnah commentator, very genius, he counted 25, which I agree with him. I didn't count, but I'm pretty sure it's more than 10. Gunther and Bamzi tried recent scholarship in Western Academy want to make it 10. They claimed, okay, some are major, some are minor. We can subsume the minor ones or second one under major ones. But the answer is that, but the way you cut it is very arbitrary. This is plausible, some major, some minor, but it has to be admitted that separating the main commandments from the auxiliary ones in such a way that the total number of principal commandments is 10 can appear to be arbitrary. And then we would do well to accept Neuwirth and Brehner's observation that number 10 doesn't really matter here. We may note that the various ways in which the Decalogue is recalled in early Jewish and patristic literature are also not considered to give exactly 10 commandments. As we saw, Jesus didn't list 10 commandments. The Jewish scholar didn't like 10 commandments. They, for them, 613, all are equal. And then even the fathers of church, when listing them, they're not necessarily limited to 10. So that 10 commandments is a little bit more recent or more Christian, which deviated from Judaism. This is Angelica Neuwirth, which kind of attracted me to this topic because of her work here. She tried to match them again, although she said the number is not important, but match them to the numbers. You know, this part of Quran is first. We have 10. Okay. Although she said 10 is not important, but she also attempted to make it 10 because she wants to really make it parallel to Bible, and maybe also under influence. Quran was influenced by Bible directly, but not only make it 10. Now find the counterparts. Okay, we don't go through that. I maybe show you another slide. So she tried to make the counterparts, but then you see there are some differences. So he says, for example, verse 36 is a modified version of the 9th commandment. And then he says, in place of commandments 2 or 4, the prohibition of taking God's name in vain, which Jews now say we shouldn't mention the name of God, and they don't mention Jehovah or Jehovah, and then write it YHWH, but we say Allah. So and we name our children Allah too, or Abdullah, or something like that. So then the sanctification of Sabbath, which is Sabbath, is not important for us. And the ban of image, that is banned for us, but it's not among the list Quran mentions. And then that's what I'm saying. We have to check this prohibition of painting or statues. How much of it is real? How much is the influence of Jewish halakha? And then the ban, and the 10, the banning of covetousness. 4 other articles are introduced. So you see the differences from Quran. Caring for relatives and the needy, desisting the infanticide is not in the 10 Commandments, caring for orphans, and enjoining modesty, and so on. And okay. Okay, some features, actually before these guys, there is another scholar really noticed, this is a Christian priest, Catholic priest. He noticed the similarities and differences. One of the features which he emphasized, and I was going to emphasize later too, look, in the Quranic Decalogue, there is no, or 10 Commandments or whatever, commandments, there is no issue about Judah, Sinai, Jewish bondage. Those all context has gone. You know, for the whole Quran is not issued that Moses is the liberator of the Jews from Egyptian slavery. Moses is a prophet of God and wants to invite even Pharaoh to way of God the same amount he wants to do the Jews. So this whole context has gone away. So the Quran completely has gone away with that part of it. Quran has gone completely separate way with the more ritualistic aspects, as we saw. But this priest had tried again to list the Quranic versions, you know, from, even he doesn't list all the way, but 23 to 37. Yeah, the main parts are here. And then match it with the one you found in Exodus and match it in other parts of Bible. So this is kind of, other people haven't done it and we didn't have time. Neuwirth said something, some people alluded, okay, maybe the 10 commandments of Quran, for the list of these commandments of Quran doesn't match on the Exodus, doesn't match completely with Deuteronomy, but matches with everything have come in Old Testament. Whatever Quran says, all of it is in Old Testament. That also is a little bit, you have see grain of salt. Some of it is not accurate, so I'm not going to go through that. There is another place Quran also mentioned this list. and it's Surah Al-An'am, 151 to Surah Al-An'am, verses 151 to 53. I don't have time to go through that. This is very summary. This is interesting to read. So if, as we see, An'am was after Asra, if Asra was the detailed, and about from verses 22 to 39, 17, 18 verses, this is short, although still text 3 verses, but the text is decent size. The similarity, differences, summary is important, but we don't have, but we have another person try to match them. So the verses are first less than 10 commandments, then An'am 3 verses, and then Asra from 20 to 39. So, but I think these guys are a little bit pushing it. First, the matching of the Bible is a push. Okay, the matching of An'am and Asra is interesting, but I prefer to go forward to emphasize something else. The other thing is this, other scholars have noticed this. One of the early ones was Sa'labi, which ancient times have noticed this parallelness between 10 Commandments with the Qur'an. Even he mentioned it with the Surah Al-An'am. Again, this historical that some Muslim scholars have that. There's not the Western scholars notice, oh, there is a Bible and Qur'an, the 10 Commandments. Similarly, you see that some, these are the really big scholars you find in Mamluk time in Egypt. These guys really like the Suyutis from the same class. These guys are very, very learned, so they have it. This is interesting to go through it, but again, we don't have modern contemporary ones. I like Mustansir Mir. He has a very good book for your children. I really recommend this. This is for us. Even I read it, I always enjoy it. Starting Quran, he when he commented these verses, he really put them on par with the Quranic Bible compared. One thing I want to say before I forgot, because there is one main part left. I tried to in 5 minutes. This part I want to say, look, this Dr. Mustansir Mir, which lives in Ohio, Youngstown, and has done great works in this field. And this book is really written for youth, but I think it's good for us. Take passages from Quran, commented on it. It's very, give the spirit of the Quran. It's very good. I really recommend to everybody, for children, for yourself, reading it. I learned from it, so it's good for anybody, high school, a little bit talented, junior high. The point is this. Look, what I'm saying is this. Although I know we see the whole complicated story of 10 Commandments, but it's surprising why these verses, which are so beautiful, so lofty, so moral. I'm not saying we should put the ritual aside, but why these are not known? Why are they not memorized? Why not recited as Ayatul Kursi are? Because these are the hikmah, the wisdom. God says, I was going to go discussion with wisdom, but at the end it says, this is the wisdom of thy Lord has delivered to thee. So why these are not hanging in our houses as much as the 4 goals or Vanyakad is there? I think these are the basic morality. This is basic religion. God wants first this. I'm not saying, look, these are the priority. I'm not saying hijab is among commandments or the other ones in command, but the first commandments are these. These are a manifestation of the morality and new boys. So I'm thinking this, at least the part the Christians have. I'm not sure how good it is, how it's important hanging on the wall. You maybe see it, not reading it, not implementing it. But I'm saying these verses need more attention. And I think Dr. Mustansir Mir did a very fine job in this regard. Okay, there is one important thing has left, and I really good to finish it to comparison, and then we'll have complete kind of discussion. Again, I'm under the influence of Dr. Saddam Hussein talk. He did really fantastic job. Look, okay, let's see what the similarity differences is. We can break this. I would done two. We can break the biblical Decalogue in these parts. Okay, the green parts and the red parts. These are the 10, okay? Exodus 21:7. These are his slides. Okay. Then what we see, what's the difference in Quranic one? Look to the red ones. The red ones disappear from Quran at some level. Even not only from Quran, in many formulations, Christianity even had, Jesus had, the father of the church had, the Syriac church had. Except the first one, which is very important, the other ones are not used. As we said, Quran doesn't mention about the image, doesn't mention of misusing the name of the Lord, doesn't mention Sabbath. Definitely Sabbath is not, we have Jum'ah, but Jum'ah is not that we don't work at all. Okay, after After Friday prayer, you can work. Okay. Then what happens is this, the Quranic Decalogue has this, the rest of it somewhere. Murder, adultery, still somewhat has it. At least let's skip it. Out of he divide them some more ritualistic or uh 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 I mean, I'm how we divide this is a little bit thing, but we go through it. But let's see what happened. Quran dropped this tree, as Noivert said. So let's see. Quran dropped this tree. Still, we have something like this, and then here we see what happens. Still, we have to wait. So we don't have 10, and then someone's gone. Quran adds something new thing here. These three. Give unto the kinsman his right, the indigent and traveler, slay not your children, fear poverty, approach not the orphan's property. So you see how the structure is changing. And it's not necessarily 10. I'm saying even those who force it to 10 is a little pushing it. But still, if you're a little trying to go with 10, we see what's happening in Quran. So it's not exactly the same. It's more universalized, it's more ethical, it's more to the time, and it's not specific to the condition of the Jews. And so on. And then you see the next level, even this last part is a little bit adjusted. False testimony against your neighbor is changed. Poverty, your neighbor is changed to this. Arrogance, pursue not your knowledge, full measure. So you see that, I mean, this is also not complete because in reality, my opinion is 25, not 10. That's, you see that, and the kind of the structure is here. So you have this one, which is, okay, a sense of religion, this tree, and the other. Okay, so what are the features are? I know it's a little fast, but maybe you get the idea.
Dr.
Yeah.
Ghoddoussi, if you can finish it in a minute or two, because then I want some time for questions. Yep, thank you.
Okay, so this is summary. The first we saw we don't have Sinaitic context. The Quranic commandments are less ritualized. There is two issues which in the verses came. One is, and historically people talk about, what are these laws? Are they rational? They're wisdom? What we mean by wisdom? Are they discovered by mind? Are they natural law or fitra? These laws, many of them seem fitra, don't murder, commit adultery. This could be a question for all the three religions. One thing is this, what interesting is this verse at the end, these two verses are crucial. The evil that is hateful to your Lord, that is from the wisdom, hikmah of your Lord was revealed to you. It seems by this sentence, God is kind of, my opinion, siding with Mu'tazila. It says these actions, those are prohibited, are evil in themselves. And that's God doesn't like them. And then again, these are samsas, are hikmah, which are wisdom, which comes matched with the fitra. I mean, this is a big topic. But the point is that they say the Quran is somehow by this verse is addressing something called Yutufriyo dilemma. It's like the one we had in Farsi says, whether God says something to do something which is good, or because God says to do something is good. Or the Euthyphrio is dilemma, which is the Platonic philosophy, says, is the pious being loved by God because it is pious, or is it pious because it is being loved by God? The dilemma is used to tease out the weakness in Euthyphrio's definition of piety as that which God's love. So we know that آنچه خسرو کند شیرین بود یا آنچه شیرین بود آن خسرو کند. This is kind of Quran sides. Look, these are evil in themselves, and God has listed them not for nothing. And so, if I go summary, I don't go to the hikmah anymore. Summary is that dual conclusion. There is an Islamic moral code. What is the conclusion we have? There is an Islamic moral code similar to biblical Decalogue, but differing significant details, and that just as the revelation of 10 commandments within the framework of the meeting between Moses and God, as stated there, so the Quranic Decalogue is placed within the context of ascension of Muhammad, is close connection with it. So it is a moral code. It is, Quran has it. It is different from Decalogue, but it is placed in the same context of meeting of Prophet Muhammad with God if we talk Isra and Miraj as Surah 17 together. Okay, I finished here. I'll put it here. If you have questions, you can read the next 2 slides where we're doing question discussions. So I really stop here. I put just you read the slides.